Hi everyone, Professor Davis here, and we're going to be looking at part 2 of ecosystems and the biosphere. In this particular video, we're going to focus in on the biomes themselves. So what is a biome? A biome is a large, relatively distinct terrestrial region, and it has certain characteristics. These characteristics include a certain climate, soil types, plants, and animals. There's going to be particular plants and animals that live in that biome, and the interacting landscapes that may be present. Okay, and so a biome is going to have some distinct characteristics. So just to give it a little example here, terrestrial biomes, this is a chart where they look at precipitation and temperature, and it puts it into a particular area. And so if you look at the bottom, temperature is increasing, and then on the side, we see precipitation increasing. So where you have lots of precipitation and high temperature, you're going to see is the tropical rainforest. But if you look high temperature but low precipitation, you have the desert. So they're like opposites. They're opposites, but the opposite is because of the precipitation. On the other hand, if you also have low temperature and low rainfall, you see that that would be the tundra. That's why they're called a cold desert, because they have the low precipitation like the desert, but they do have the also low temperatures that makes it different. All right, so this is just to kind of give you a little bit of an idea. So let's take a look first at the tropical rainforest. So guys, this is not all the information that can be found in here. I'm just trying to hit some high points on this. The main thing is to help you be able to complete your assignment over the biome activity that we have in class, but also to prepare you for the questions that will be on your exam over this. So the tropical rainforest is a mineral poor soil. We thought because of all the biodiversity that's found in the rainforest that its soil was very rich in nutrients. And so we ended up cutting down part of the rainforest to hopefully have new good farmland. And we found really quick that when you remove all the organisms of the rainforest, the soil is actually very poor and it's not good for farming. And so we messed up there. But we do see that the high rainfall is going to be important in the recycling here, and the decomposers in the soil are going to help with that diversity. The rainfall is evenly distributed throughout the year, and it's anywhere between 50 to 260 inches each year. There are high species richness and high productivity found in rainforests. The average temperature is anywhere between 20 degrees Celsius and 34 degrees Celsius. So you have these kind of consistent higher temperatures. Now, this isn't in the hundreds or anything like that, but we also see that it's very humid. And so for those of us who live in areas where humidity is almost zero all the time, it's going to feel a lot warmer than it is because of the high humidity and the higher heats. The next one is the savanna. The savanna is a tropical grassland. It does have trees, but they're widely scattered apart. And we do see that there's going to be a lot of grassy areas in between. We do see that this occurs in areas that are tropical, but have low or seasonal rainfall. So they have like a wet season and a dry season. And the rainfall is anywhere between 20 to 50 inches. Animals that live in the savanna are things like giraffes, elephants, lions, hyenas, and springbok. Again, that's not all of them, but those are some examples. We also see that some of the plant life there are the acacia trees, elephant grass. You have the baobab trees and the Bermuda grass that are present. Again, this isn't all the plants. These are a few that do very well in this area. The next one we want to look at is the desert. The desert can be a cold desert if the temperature climates don't get very high, but warm deserts are normally what we think about here, and this is going to be where they can be subtropical or tropical regions. They are characterized by having low levels of precipitation, hardly any. Organisms with specialized water conserving adaptations are going to be living in these areas. And this also includes adaptations for plants. Plants are going to be scarce, but some of these plants do have adaptations that allow them to grow in these desert climates. These are things like a cactus, yuccas, that kind of thing for our plants. Now, on the animal side, you're going to see things more like roadrunners. Of course, you're going to have different types of lizards and reptiles, things like Gila monsters. We can also see peccary could be present, kangaroo rats, and bobcats. Again, this isn't a complete list, but these are some examples. Now, we down here live in an area that is kind of like a desert. Now, it's not as big of a desert as like the Sahara Desert, but we do see it has some desert characteristics. And we live actually in an area that's called more of a chaparral. With this, there are thickets of small leaf evergreens that are present. Now, these are not going to grow very tall, and this is where mesquite bushes are a really big part of the plants in this area, along with yucca and cacti as well. The climate does have a little bit of a wet, mild winter, so we do get some rainfall, but again, it is not consistent. And the summers, though, are normally pretty dry. All right, but a chaparral is kind of a subgroup that is kind of in between the desert and what we're going to look at next, which is the grassland. So grasslands, there are what we call temperate grasslands. They have very deep mineral rich soil. So these are really good for farmland. So here in the United States, we see that this is going to be more in like the Midwest, middle area of the country where we see lots of corn and wheat fields and that sort of thing. We do see that it does have moderate but uncertain precipitation. So sometimes it's very consistent, other times it's not. But we do see that they are well suited for growing grain crops. We do see that you have a lot, because it is grasslands, you have a lot of herd-like mammals that live in these areas that are going to consume more of the grass that's present. Since it doesn't have a lot of trees or things where stuff can hide, your bigger predators are not going to be as present as often. They will normally be on kind of the cusp of where other biomes come in contact with the grasslands, because they can't hide and stay and have the ability to hunt as easily in these areas. At least not all the time. The next one are the temperate forests. The temperate forests are where precipitation is relatively high, anywhere between 30 to 60 inches a year. The soils are rich in organic matter, and they are going to have a lot of trees that have a broad leaf. These are the trees, though, that when we talk about the trees being deciduous, they're the ones that have the leaves that change colors and fall off in the winter time. Average annual temperature in the deciduous forest is going to be around 50 degrees. In this case, it is in Fahrenheit. There are 4 distinct seasons. So you would see 3 months of spring, 3 months of summer, 3 months of autumn, and 3 months of winter. Some plants that would grow here, or trees, would be oak, maples, hickories, and elms. And animals that would be present would be eagles, black bears, deer, squirrels, and coyotes. The next forest is going to be the boreal forest. These are also known a lot of times as the taiga or taiga areas. These coniferous forests are going to dominate in the areas where you see the transition into a little colder environment. They do have cold winters, short growing seasons, and they do have acidic, mineral poor soil. So not good soil like we saw in the other forests. These are belted across North America and Eurasia, so up in Canada as well as in Russia. Plants include a lot of evergreens, so those gymnosperms that we learned about. Things like spruce, fir, pine trees. There are a few deciduous breed of plants, but not that many. Animals include any of these fur-bearing predators like the lynx, lots of different members of the weasel family. Herbivores are going to include things like the snowshoe hare, red squirrels, lemmings, and voles. All right, so you got a lot of different variety here in the boreal forest. The last land or terrestrial biome we want to talk about is the Arctic tundra. This is the northernmost biome, and it's going to have a frozen layer of subsoil called the permafrost. This permafrost never fully thaws out. And so because of this, we do see that the soil that's used, that plants can actually utilize for growth, is very limited. And so because of this, these plants have to grow low to the ground. They're adapted to these extreme cold and short growing seasons. So these are going to include sedges, mosses, lichens, grasses, and they do have a very huge variety of wildflowers. These flowers can grow and bloom. And so if, like in Texas, we look forward to when the bluebells are going to bloom and people will go and take pictures and all this stuff. Here, you're going to have this very short time though where in their little summer, there will be a huge variety of wildflowers that will bloom, which is very pretty and kind of cool. But because of this soil not being thawed out completely, they cannot grow for very long, and we see that their roots can't go very deep. Animals in these areas include things like caribou. Caribou is also known as reindeer, muskox, Arctic hares, voles, and lemmings. They are going to be more of the principal herbivores that are present, but we do see there are a few carnivores like Arctic foxes, snow owls, polar bears, and wolves can survive in these areas. So again, here is just an overview of where these are located. So this is a world map and it kind of shows you the concentration of the different types of biomes. So take a closer look at this. The last thing I want to talk to you about are a little bit about the aquatic ecosystems. So the aquatic ecosystems are going to be the ones that deal with water. Depending on which group we're looking at is going to really be focused on the salinity. So how much salt is present? Is it a saltwater ecosystem or is it what we consider a freshwater ecosystem? We also see that the amount of dissolved oxygen is also really important in aquatic ecosystems on what kind of life they can sustain. The ability of the sunlight to penetrate through the water is also important for the ones who do photosynthesis. And so we'll see in the very deep oceans, water or light can't penetrate. And so they're going to have to be able to start their food chain in a different way since they can't utilize photosynthesis. So let's talk about marine environments first. These are the ocean environments, the salt water for the most part. We have the intertidal zone. This is where the shoreline is between high and low tides. Organisms here have to be adapted because in low tide, they're going to be exposed more to the air and they'll have only like very shallow pools of water. But during high tide, they'll be completely submerged underwater. So they're going to have to be able to live in both kind of environments. The neritic province is the next one, and this is going to be the more open ocean from the shoreline to the depths of about 200 meters. This is going to be the area that tends to have the highest productivity and biodiversity in the ocean. Coral reefs are part of this, which we'll talk and hit on a little bit later, but they have the ability to allow for photosynthesis to take place because of the light being able to penetrate this area. It also is going to normally have pretty stable temperatures, high oxygen contents, and low pressure. As we go deeper into the ocean, we go into the oceanic province. In the oceanic province, we do see that this is the deeper ocean of about 200 meters. Nutrients become pretty scarce in this set of water, and so because of that, there's less productivity. Now, this doesn't mean life doesn't go through here, but a lot of times it's going to pass more through this zone, right? And so this is where a lot of times the nurseries are for our mammals, like our different types of whales, where they'll go into these areas and give birth to their calves and they'll feed them because they offer milk to them, but the mom doesn't get to eat very much because the nutrients are scarce. But once the baby is able to do better, the calf is able to do better in the water, they'll move up into areas where there's higher productivity and more food sources. But that also means there's more predators that could attack their calves. And so we have to be careful with that. The next one is even deeper, and this is the abysmal zone. Okay, the abysmal zone is depths of 400 meters or greater. This water tends to be very cold. There tends to also be high pressure, high oxygen, but low nutrients. And a lot of times these nutrients that they do get access to come from volcanic vents. Okay, there's no light, so you can't have any photosynthesis present. So chemiosynthesis is important, and they do this along those hydrothermal vents, those volcanic vents at the bottom of the ocean. Now, one thing to note, guys, is we have not been able to really investigate this part of the world very well. The technology we have with certain submarines and stuff, can get us down there to a point, but the pressure is so high that it doesn't allow us to be able to gain access to good like video footage or good stuff for the most part of studying these guys. Planet Earth and some of those documentaries have done a good job of giving us a little bit of insight, but we can't bring these organisms back up to the surface because they are designed for that high pressure. And so when the pressure gets less as they move up, it distorts their body proportions, but it also can cause them to expand and explode. All right, so they are adapted for those lower areas with the higher pressure. This is also the area where a lot of the organisms have bioluminescence, where they'll glow. So let's talk a little bit about coral reefs. Coral reefs are normally going to be ocean ridges that are formed by marine invertebrates living in the more warm, shallow waters off the coast. We do see that when these waters are going to be mostly nutritionally poor, but organisms do rely on a lot of mutualistic relationships. And so because they live in these mutualistic symbiotic relationships, they can be successful in these areas. Now, I do want you to recall that coral is an animal. It is not a plant. Okay, so make sure that you pay attention to that. We do see that this is one of the most diverse biomes. And so if you were to relate it to one on land, it would be like the tropical rainforest. It has a ton of biodiversity, but nutrients are poor. They have to be constantly recycled like we see with the tropical rainforest. The next area are the estuaries. Estuaries are coastal bodies of water with access to both the ocean and fresh water. So there's a mixing of fresh water and ocean water in these areas. It is a transitional time, okay, when we go from fresh to marine, and there's always going to be some land that's part of this as well. These are normally known as bays, lagoons, inlets, or even sounds. We do see a lot of organisms that like to live in estuaries. These include shorebirds, different types of fish, crabs, and lobsters. Some marine mammals are able to kind of go back and forth. They can't go deep into the freshwater river, but they can go into the estuary area. We also see that shellfish are pretty big in these areas, like clams, marine worms, and some seabirds. In freshwater ecosystems, these are going to include the flowing water ecosystems. This means streams, rivers, brooks, that kind of thing, creeks. These are going to be where their point of origin or the source of their water is going to be very cold. It's normally in a higher elevation, like in a mountain. Tends to be. Lower nutrients are present, but the water is very clear and fast moving, meaning it's high in oxygen. As it flows away from its source, the width of the channels normally get wider. So the river, it goes more from like a stream to a river, a larger body. This means that we do see the water starts to slow down a little bit, and the temperatures also begin to increase. Now, these are the ones who are flowing. Some of the other freshwaters are standing water. Standing water ecosystems include ponds and lakes. These are influenced a lot of times by the terrestrial biome that they're part of, that surrounds it, whether it's a boreal forest or if it's a deciduous forest or the tropical rainforest. But we do see that they are going to be ones that are formed where water goes in, but it doesn't really come out of those ponds and lakes. We also see that there are freshwater wetlands. Wetlands are environments in which the soil is either permanently or periodically saturated in water. So these are marshes, swamps, and bogs. And here in the United States, the big ones we have are going to be found like Louisiana and Florida, where you have these marshes. We call it like the bayou in Louisiana, where you have to go by boat to get to certain areas. You also see that their houses a lot of times are built on stilts because of how much moisture and water can be in the area as well. All right, and so these are your wetlands. All right, so that covers all the different biomes that we're introducing here. It's just a basic overview, but at least gives you some of that information. If you have any questions on any of this, please let me know.